Today, we're digging into something huge, a proposal that could completely reshape Pakistan's government as we know it, the 27th Constitutional Amendment. Now, this is a really complex and, frankly, super controversial idea, and we're going to break down exactly what it could mean for the country's courts, its military, and for you.
And yeah, that quote from legal expert Abdul Moiz Jafari really sets the tone, doesn't it? It frames this whole debate not as just some boring legal tweak, but as a massive fight for the very soul of the country's constitution. The stakes are clearly incredibly high.
All right, so what is this proposed 27th Amendment really, and why is it causing such an uproar?
To put it simply, we are not talking about a minor adjustment here. This amendment is aiming to completely redesign the architecture of two of the most powerful institutions in the entire country. This is a top-to-bottom, fundamental overhaul.
So at the very heart of this entire proposal is the creation of a brand new, and let me tell you, an extremely powerful court. Now, the whole idea of a constitutional court isn't exactly new. It was actually thought up by the Austrian jurist Hans Kelsen way back in the early 20th century. He saw it as a way to make sure parliaments don't get out of control. You see them a lot in Europe where they act as a check on power. The big question here, though, is how that idea is being used in Pakistan's very unique situation.
And that leads us to two totally different stories about what's going on. On one hand, the government says this new Federal Constitutional Court, or FCC, is just about creating a special court for tricky constitutional cases. But on the other hand, critics are saying, no, no, no. They see a totally different motive, a calculated plan to gut the power of the current Supreme Court and move it to a new court that's easier for the government to control.
And when you look at the powers this new court would have, wow. It would get to decide on everything from arguments between governments to protecting your most basic rights. But the real game changer, the part that has everyone talking, is that last bullet point, which comes from a proposed new Article 189. It says the FCC's decisions would be final for every single court in the country. That includes the Supreme Court. So this isn't just a new court, it's a complete reordering of the judicial universe.
So you can see how this one new court could completely change the balance of power in the government. Let's look at how. The controversy starts right at the very top. The amendment says the first ever Chief Justice of this new all-powerful court won't be picked based on seniority. Instead, they'll be appointed by the president, but on the advice of the prime minister, picked from the current group of Supreme Court judges. Critics say this just injects politics into the court right from day one. And just look at this. The visual here tells the whole story. On the left, you've got the current system, Supreme Court at the top of the pyramid. But on the right, with the 27th Amendment, the FCC gets plopped right on top of it, essentially pushing the Supreme Court down a rung. It becomes a subordinate court on all constitutional issues.
Okay, this is where things get really concerning for a lot of legal experts. Tucked away inside the amendment are changes to Articles 200 and 206, and they create what critics have nicknamed a coercion mechanism. Here's how it works. A judge gets offered a job at the new FCC. If they say no, they're considered retired. Just like that, they're out.
Advocate Samir Kosa just cuts right to the chase. He and others believe this isn't just some HR rule. They see it as a powerful tool to weed out independent judges who might not toe the line. It's a way for the executive to basically reshape the judiciary to its liking.
But hold on, it's not just the courts. The amendment also proposes some pretty massive changes to the military's top brass.
So here's what's on the table. First, the role of chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee gets eliminated, and that power is consolidated, making the Chief of Army Staff also the Chief of the Defense Forces. But the change that's really turning heads is the creation of new, permanent 5-star ranks, like Field Marshal. And get this, they'd stay in uniform for life with a very special status.
And here's the real kicker. This amendment would give these individuals the same kind of personal immunity from any legal action that the president of the country gets. Think about that for a second. That is an unbelievable level of legal protection, essentially putting them above the law.
You can just hear the shock in the legal community with this quote from Advocate Jafari. The fear is that the Constitution, which is supposed to be a document for all people, is being changed to give special treatment and protection to specific people. And that, they argue, is a massive step away from democratic ideals.
So, we've gone through all the technical details about the courts and the military, but now we need to ask the most important question of all.
Right. Why should any of this matter to you, just living your life? How does messing with the Supreme Court's structure or creating a new military rank actually affect anybody on a daily basis?
Well, according to the experts we've been hearing from, the consequences could be huge. It's like a domino effect. If people believe the courts are controlled by the government, it can weaken the rule of law for absolutely everyone. It could put your fundamental rights at risk, destroy public trust in the justice system, and even hurt the economy.
And this quote from Samir Kosa just hits the nail on the head. It perfectly sums up what's at stake. He's arguing that the whole point of having independent courts isn't to protect judges. It's to protect citizens. It's supposed to be the one place anyone can go to get a fair shake when they're up against someone with power.
In the end, this whole debate about the 27th Amendment boils down to a really basic question about how the country is run. It's about who has power, what limits are placed on that power, and what happens when those limits start to disappear. And it leaves all of us with one final, critical thought to chew on. When the checks and balances designed to hold power accountable are themselves dismantled, who is left to guard the guardians?